The genius and stripped-down simplicity of Henri Matisse. Author Coco Melis explores the joy and pain of sisterly bonds and the women speaking out against gender-based violence in the music industry. That's all coming up in today's show. But first, she dazzled the audience in Paris, in France, and all over the world when she sang from the top of the Eiffel Tower at the 2024 Olympic Games. Celine Dion will be wowing the crowds once again when she returns to the stage for a string of concerts here in Paris in September. Since a series of mysterious billboards in the French capital hinted at the singer's comeback, fans have been gearing up to get their tickets.
It's for Celine's comeback. I'm in Paris just for the day, so now's the time to capture the moment and come back when she goes on tour.
It's brilliant news, and if she comes, I'll have to go and see her.
To me, she's the greatest singer ever. I've always wanted to see her, and I didn't think it would ever be possible.
I knew you were the best! Next to a master of colour, collage and bold expressive forms, Henri Matisse. A new exhibition at the Grand Palais here in Paris is exploring the artist's twilight years, a time when his health deteriorated and his creative output accelerated, producing work as varied as the blue nudes and the luminous interiors of the Rosaire Chapel in Vence in the south of France. Focusing on the period 1941 to 1954, this show also explores his status as a so-called degenerate artist during the Nazi occupation of France. Here's a peek and a word from the curator.
Matisse has never been so prolific. During this period, he worked across a wide range of media, including not only cut-out gouaches, but paintings, stained glass works, brush drawings and books. So that is really what we are showcasing in this exhibition. It was also a time for him of greater simplicity. We are really moving towards purity and towards colour that is as expressive as possible. It's more intense, as if it were a kind of apotheosis.
Well, since the Me Too movement set shockwaves through many creative sectors, there's been something of a reckoning in the French film and theatre industries as people speak up and demand accountability. However, a recent editorial published by many respected jazz musicians suggests that their milieu has not yet started to tackle the sexism and sexual violence that's often been silenced in the past. Our reporters Solène Claus and Yong Chim went to find out how women in the industry are turning things around.
The familiar tune of Fly Me to the Moon. A staple of every jam session, but this time, be it on brass, strings, percussion or vocals, the stage is dedicated to women and gender minorities.
Alors on va passer à un premier groupe d'impro total. Angèle au trombone.
In 2024, Flore Benguigui left her band L'Impératrice as a result of humiliating and controlling behaviour. Flore and her colleague Sophie Newman have since opened a creative space dedicated to female musicians, the monthly Cherchez la Jam sessions.
There's
a real stereotype about singers, that they're not real musicians or somehow below instrumentalists. I'm a classically trained jazz musician, but I often felt that judgment, so I was really traumatized by jams in general. I never felt truly legitimate or relaxed enough to take the stage. When we started these jam sessions, I felt like it was healing something in me.
There are a number of musicians who really stand out, especially in jazz, and we need a bit more female representation. Spaces like these will allow musicians to gain visibility and express themselves more freely.
To avoid stereotyping, musicians sign up at the desk instead of putting their hands up, as is usually done in jam sessions.
Par réflexe, on va
In mixed jams, out of habit, we sometimes fade into the background. Here we have more space to exist, and it's quite refreshing.
I think we all needed a space like this, a more caring space where people listen to each other.
Flor Benguigui has recently released a new album, a fully female-led project. But establishing themselves in the creative world is a challenge for many female musicians, few of whom have received technical training. At the Motorbar studio in Paris, Les Ingénieuses workshop provides training for a small group of artists so they can become more independent.
When you're an up-and-coming artist, you're not really sure of yourself, and you're intimidated by those who know better than you, especially men. What frustrates me is not being able to say, actually, no, that's not where I want to go creatively.
Every angle of music production is covered, be it setting up microphones, recording a voice, or sitting down at the mixing desk.
We provide them with the knowledge they need to feel capable of working independently on their own projects, to know how to communicate with their colleagues and to affirm themselves in creative conversations.
And together, carry female voices even further.
Now to an author whose latest book is a love letter to sorority in all its messy glory. After the success of her debut, Cleopatra and Frankenstein, Coco Melis' second novel, Blue Sisters, has just been translated into French. As a bona fide Gen Z literary favourite, she told us more about being the baby of her own family and why Paris is always a good idea.
Hello, I'm Coco Melis, and my book Blue Sisters, or Les Sœurs Bleues, is a modern-day Little Women, a retelling of four sisters who I would say are a psychologist's absolute dream to analyse. When my sisters read the book, I think they were actually disappointed that they were not more like the sisters. The book is so fictionalized and it's very informed by my love of my sisters and how I feel about them. But the characters themselves are pretty extreme. You know, I have a lawyer, a boxer, a model, a teacher, and my sisters are not very much actually like the characters, but they were definitely excited. And obviously they're in the acknowledgements and the book is dedicated to my closest sister in age. So that was very important, and she was thrilled and showed it to everyone. I thought a lot about birth order when I was writing this book and, you know, the roles that we play in our family and how we can sort of adhere to them or try to break them. I'm the youngest of four. I very much identify as the youngest. I think the youngest is the best role in the family. You get to be the baby. In many ways, no matter how old you get, you're always the youngest. So you always have that sense of being kind of cared for. But I also think the youngest in a family is often like the whistleblower in a family who sees the dynamics the most clearly. And that can be quite an uncomfortable role. So I wanted to also include that in the novel. The youngest sister, I think, is also the most critical of the family. And that's an important but sometimes tense role to play. I wanted to write about addiction, although in some ways I think the topic of addiction chose me, as opposed to me choosing it. I think that novels are very sacred and intimate spaces. They're a private place that a reader can go and sort of confront what makes us the most human. Addiction is something that is steeped in silence and shame. It's incredibly isolating to live with. And so I think that makes it a very powerful topic for writing because it's something that can make the reader feel a lot less alone when talked about. And it's also something I dealt with in my own life and in my family life. So I always felt I was sort of uniquely positioned to write about addiction in a way that is both honest and I hope unflinching, but also compassionate and hopeful. I wanted to include a character with endometriosis because it is an extremely common thing that women deal with. It is hugely undiagnosed and untalked about. The average time it takes for a woman to get a diagnosis is around 10 years. I think stories can shine a light on topics that often exist in the dark. And I wanted to write about the emotional and physical experience of pain, which often goes unseen or unrecognized. And I've heard from many readers who have dealt with endometriosis analysis that when they read this book that they felt seen for the first time in their entire life, including, in the medical industry where they're often ignored. So it feels like a powerful part of the novel, although of course I wish it didn't have to be such a big topic, because I wish that these things were talked about more freely and were given more attention. I think all of us are familiar with just the kind of like the physical and emotional experience. If you scroll for an hour on your phone, the sense of sort of emptiness that I'm often left with after that. But when I read for an hour, I feel so nourished and filled up. And so I think there's always going to be a place for books. And literature is a place where we go to understand ourselves. It's a mirror, it's a reflective space. That's so incredibly crucial. So while I think there is a lot of competition from social media has also helped books. It's been a place that people can give recommendations, find community, talk about the books they love. And that is something I find really exciting. France has always been a huge love for me. I'm from London. There's a famous quote by Diana Vreeland, the former editor of Vogue, who said the best thing about London is Paris, which is very traitorous for me to agree with, but I'm afraid that I do. I just have always loved Paris. I love French culture. I love French literature. I grew up reading Colette and Flaubert. Bonjour Tristesse was a huge seminal novel for me as a teenager that I reread every few years, and I just adore. So I always wanted to write at least part of each of my novels in Paris. It could be a little intimidating because I think the French, have high standards for both their literature and for depictions of their city and country, but I hope I've done it justice.
And finally, to a circus show from an Australian company who laughs in the face of gravity, a playful display of acrobatic excellence, pushing the limits of human performance. It's called A Simple Space, and it's on at the Théâtre Bobino here in Paris. We'll leave you with a preview. Otherwise, do join us here next time on Arts 24 for more movies, arts and culture. There's more news coming up just after this.